That craziness is what provides them with the motivation to go talk to women where they could go to jail because they talked to her in the wrong way, where they could be shut down and socially shamed. Going up and approaching somebody in a dating context is incredibly difficult. And the line between the motivation you need to go up and approach a random woman who you're interested in and the motivation you need to shoot up your school, I think is a much narrower line than
Oh,
many women in
no,
this
no, no, no,
society
no.
would
I
want to
feel
believe.
honestly like in many ways shooting up a school is way easier, because
Yes,
like
and that's the point. You need the guys to have this insane motivation. Chris Williamson's male sedation hypothesis proposes that online virtual worlds, particularly pornography and video games, have a pacifying effect on young men who are struggling to find romantic partners or sexual partners. The key points of this hypothesis are: one, pornography provides a small dose of reproductive fitness cues. They do. In the studies where it showed higher rates of murder and stuff like that tied to single men, these are societies that completely ban porn and masturbation because they're Muslim societies mostly is where you're seeing this.
yeah. One thing I kind of wonder is do you get the free radical problem, or do you get essentially like risky young men in a society where porn isn't necessarily banned, but where NoFap is pervasive?
Would you like to know more?
Hello, Simone. I am excited to be with you here today. Today, we are going to do an episode that asks, why aren't there more mass shootings by incels?
I was really wondering this. Like we are recording this fairly close to when President Donald Trump was almost killed. He got his ear shot through. And I'm like, why are more people not doing this? If apparently it's so freaking easy to go out with an AR and just shoot it as president, like why are people not going out all the
Well, it's
time?
not just that. I mean, this is something that's been well studied and we've mentioned in previous episodes. If you look at polygynous societies versus monogamous, equivalent monogamous societies, you're
Right.
typically going to get way more like much higher rates of terrorism in the polygynous societies. And the question is why? Why do you get higher rates of terrorism? Why even in monogamous societies you get higher rates of terrorism as marriage rates go down, which was
Mm.
a thing that was studied in Egypt. They were looking at like during economic downturns where people couldn't pay the bride price, more men would go unmarried and you directly get more terrorists. And the answer is an unmarried man has, nothing to do with their time. Well, not just nothing to do with their time. They have no vested interest in the social order as it stands. So
Well, in other words, hormonally also, I would argue they're being told go big or go home. Like you are genetically going to die. You might as well be dead in the water
biologically
now.
speaking, if they were in a tribe and under the tribe's current order, there was no chance that they would ever get a partner,
Mhm.
then it made sense to risk your life to
Mhm.
up in the social order of that tribe.
Yeah, or, do something insane that could possibly win you a sexual partner and therefore, biologically survive to the next generation. So your
Yeah.
genes, your body, everything that you've evolved is screaming at you as a male, go big or go home. So you're
Bigger go
going to
home.
do increasingly risky things.
Mhm, mhm. So,
Although, I will maybe push back on that a little bit, right? Because there's some mixed data on this, right? Like I understand that like testosterone is high when you're in a very like sort of competitive male environment, when you're not in a stable relationship. But then there's also some research that finds that male testosterone kind of plummets when you're on a losing streak. And there
yeah,
have
but
been
this
some
isn't tied
theories.
to testosterone.
Yeah,
This
okay.
no, this is not tied to
It's
testosterone.
tied to
Actually,
desperation
many of these guys, by the biology that we
or very
understand it,
low
would have
testosterone, which is why they're
lower
incels.
testosterone in that moment.
Yeah,
This is
okay.
different than a testosterone-driven go big or go home push.
Okay.
This is a
An existential
an existential
nihilism.
thing. Like it's worse destroying society because it's not working for me. And actually, there was a paper on
Mm.
this just last year. It came out in 2023, and it was titled "Why Isn't There More Incel Violence?"
Oh, okay.
And I'm gonna put it on the screen here.
Asking the good
Um,
questions. Thanks, guys.
and Chris Williamson actually is famous for having a theory on this.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
The
Friend
anti-incel.
of the show. We've yeah, we talked to him occasionally. I've been on a show. I'd really love to do it again sometime. I find him. He's a fantastic online commenter. Whenever I hear him, I'm always like, yeah, you have good takes. A little vanilla for my perspective,
He's
but
trying to speak to the everyman. You can understand.
Yeah. He's very much an everyman guy. So anyway, this is what Perplexity had to say about his take. Chris Williamson's male sedation hypothesis proposes that online virtual worlds, particularly pornography and video games, have a pacifying effect on young men who are struggling to find romantic partners or sexual partners. The key points of this hypothesis are: one, pornography provides a small dose of reproductive fitness cues, while video games offer status and community cues. Two, these virtual experiences act as counterfeit fitness cues, meaning men feel as if their sexual needs are being met to some degree. Three, as a
Mm.
result, these online worlds reduce motivation for engaging in real life meeting effort and risky behavior associated with the quote unquote young male syndrome. Four, this sedation effect may explain why there isn't more violence or a disruption from an increasing number of men who are not having sex. Five, the hypothesis suggests that modern society is essentially short circuiting men's natural drives, reducing their motivation to seek goals and accomplish things in the real world. Wilson argues that this phenomenon, Williamson argues that this phenomenon could be contributing to the decline in dating efforts among young men, as well as potentially explaining lower levels of sexual and non sexual violence than otherwise might be expected.
Huh. I guess I could see
First,
that.
I'm so
Yeah.
impressed with AI these days that it can take his theory and I feel like really effectively boil it down and then give me a good summary. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
But I
Do you think
mean,
it misses anything?
do I think it what?
Misses anything?
No, not from what I've heard. No, that this is fairly accurate. It's that young men in a historic perspective, they one had a desire to mate, but they also had a desire to hunt and war and go on the kill and everything.
Yeah.
And this desire has been masturbated. By masturbating, I mean using something that's not the thing that's supposed to fulfill that emotion to fulfill that emotion in
Mhm.
various ways historically. Probably the most common is sports, right? Like sports very clearly is meant to masturbate young men's desire for war. Somebody who was on Chris Williams' show while they were talking was like, yeah, I played paintball for the first time when I was younger. And then I was like, oh, this is like weirdly fun. Like, even though I don't contextualize, and I was the same way. Growing up, I didn't contextualize myself as a particularly masculine man,
Yeah,
but
but why
I
does this feel
love
so good?
paintball. Yeah, why
Mm.
why do I enjoy going with a group of friends and hunting other people to shoot? Why is this like just feels so natural? And I think it's because it is natural. It's the way that we're programmed. But I think that probably you're going to be mentally healthier as a young person. And this is why I would encourage my kids to do this with
Hmm.
more physical versions of this. So, for example, while I think video games are useful in masturbating this instinct to some extent, I would strongly recommend my kids join a local paintball club or something like that, because I think that the pain associated with that and the actual physical
Yeah, the
exhaustion
actual
associated with
physical
that,
exertion.
it
Totally.
does more to fully fulfill these pathways and ensure that their brain doesn't think that they're, well, I don't know, some sort of a eunuch, growing up in Babylon. And that's when I say growing up in Babylon, people may not know. So one of the King Xerxes, the first one, I want to say it was Xerxes, who conquered and formed the Persian Empire. He has a quote where he says something along the lines of, because people are like, why aren't you moving our capital outside of the like barren mountains, right?
Mhm.
Like, this is a horrible area. We've conquered all these wealthy cities. And he goes, the moment we move to the wealthy cities and we raise our children in the wealthy cities, they will become weak. Like, strong areas breed strong children, weak areas breed weak children. And would you know, it was in a generation of moving the capital to Babylon, like up the most city of cities. I think it was 2 generations actually. They ended up collapsing as an empire. And that's because I think he was fundamentally right. If you fulfill these with lower order things, you will get lower order outcomes. Now, with
Mm.
sexuality itself, do I believe sexuality is actually fully being sublimated by pornography?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. In the studies where it showed higher rates of murder and stuff like that tied to single men, these are societies that completely ban porn and masturbation because they're Muslim societies mostly is where you're seeing this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it would make sense that in those societies, the system would end up getting fully activated and you would get the murderful guy.
Whereas here you can sedate. Uh-huh.
But
Yeah, all the
here's
more reason to not ban porn. Come on, people.
Well, actually, we'll do an episode. Hold on, I'll pull up the statistic right here. So this is actually from our book, The Pragmatist Guide to Sexuality. Across nations, more permissive attitudes toward pornography are correlated with lower rates of rape and less sexual violence against women. A great case study of this can be seen with the Czech Republic, where porn was illegal under communism, then legalized when the party fell. This decriminalization of pornography caused, in 1 year, grapes to decline over 37%.
Oh my
Think about like the
gosh.
human lives that are affected by this,
Yeah.
and child sexual abuse by about 50%. How
Ugh.
many
Can
children are
people
you consigning
stop coming
to
for our
grape?
porn?
Come here, kid! I'm gonna tie you to the radiator and crank me out!
Okay, these kids were obviously horrified.
Not that girl? Look, she's totally asking for it.
What?
Look at her. She's begging to get graped.
Will you listen to yourself?
Look what she's wearing.
Look what she's wearing?
It's purple.
It is so fucking, it's so dumb that people who want this. Similar results were seen when porn laws were loosened in Denmark, Japan, China, and Hong Kong.
Wow.
Other studies reinforce these results, such as one in aggression and behavior. This study was titled "The Pleasure is Momentary, the Expense Damnable, the Influence of Pornography on Rape and Sexual Assault," that found a inverse correlation between porn consumption and violent behavior towards women, specifically rape and sexual assaults. The study findings suggest the more porn a man consumes, the less likely he is to commit these violent acts against women. And you find this across the board. We're going to do another episode where we just go over this, but like another great one is for every 10% increase in internet access in the US, there is a corresponding regional decrease of 7.3% in rapes.
Internet is more porn.
What are you doing?
Internet is more porn.
That's gross.
That's why you think the net was porn.
So basically all of the evidence, and I don't think he even knew this evidence that I just went over, suggests that he is right and these things are intrinsically connected. The reason why we haven't had an incel uprising is pornography, online pornography.
Oh, thank goodness. And video games and paintball.
But then the question becomes, what's the correct amount to engage with these things, Simone? Because
Yeah, right. Yeah.
clearly we don't want our kids completely neutered by these, fake masturbatory sources of pleasure, but we also want them to be able to utilize them judiciously so that they aren't just distracted by these evolutionary drives that just are irrelevant in a modern context or don't drive, perfect value aligned. It's very much like the something about Mary, you got to masturbate before you go on a date or you'll be too horny to think straight line.
Oh, look, the most honest moment in a man's life are the few minutes after he's blown his load. And the reason for it is that you're no longer trying to get laid. You're thinking like a girl. And girls love that.
What is the right way to engage with this stuff, given that it does short circuit the male brain so effectively?
Yeah, my intuition is that we need to go back, and this is couched in me not being a Tradwife fan, right? I'm not like, let's go back to the 50s because it was so perfect then. But that seems to be the right level. And let me explain why. There was porn. Absolutely, there was porn. But you had to go buy it in a magazine. It wasn't unlimited. So it was inherently, what's the word for when you're controlling doses? But these were small controlled doses. You couldn't overdose basically based on the supply that was readily available to you. You could go
a
to
lot
a
of people,
strip
by the
club.
way, if you're talking, I actually disagree with this.
Oh, really?
Well, I think the porn of the 50s. So I have a actually pretty strange moral relationship with pornography.
No. I'm not saying we go back to that style. It could all be hentai. It could all be whatever.
Okay, yeah, I know. I think that the porn industry that features real humans is fundamentally unethical and shouldn't exist.
No, I'm all for hentai, but I think if we went back to where you could you had to buy small packets.
It's not just hentai. I think you've got to have AI porn. You can have digital
Sure.
art porn. You can have any porn that doesn't use real people. But I also think that the Bible talks about this as well. So the Bible says that you should not lust over other women when you're married. You should you know, to look at another woman and lust over her is the same as creating adultery.
Oh.
And I think that that's what it's pointing towards, is that pornography should not include real women because of the downstream negative effects of that industry.
Well, thank goodness for hentai then.
Okay, but here's the question. What about something like OnlyFans? A lot of people use that to pay, you know, for their, you know, families and kids. And do you think that that should be legal?
Wait, what?
OnlyFans. Should OnlyFans be legal?
See, I'm so like in favor of, you know, let people earn money doing what they want to do. And
Yeah,
honestly,
so
like
I'm
for
actually
many
gonna push back.
women,
I don't
for
think that
many
your
women,
system works. I don't think it works in a modern context. People will use VPNs. People will use all the countries I
yeah.
know that actually have pornography bans. Just everyone gets
No,
around
no,
it.
you're right. No, and I'm saying like you were saying in an ideal world, like I
No,
can't
I'm saying
in
not
the
in an
internet.
ideal
There's
world.
no
I'm saying for
now.
our kids,
Oh,
how
for our
would you
kids.
relate to this? How do you
Oh,
teach them to engage with these things to achieve optimal outcomes?
well, so I think one of the key things is for us to be very open with it to the point where we make it not cool. Not so we're not making it shameful, because that's very damaging. We found that like, you know, for example, masturbation only really seems to be damaging if you like turn it into an addiction, or if you're very ashamed of it and then you like feel really bad about it and it causes all these negative side effects. So I don't want to shame porn for our kids, but I do want to make it thoroughly uncool. And if we're like, hey, would you like some porn? Like, let's talk about this. And like, you know what
My
this
mom was
fetish
actually
is?
like that when I was a kid. She's like, "Hey, you're at that age. Do you want me to get some porn for you?" But I know you
And
can't buy it yourself.
be like, so what are you into? You know, just like to really, really make them uncomfortable. And so like they're aware of it. And like, but we also make it uncool. Because I don't want them to be like, look at me. I'm so great for having discovered this.
No, I
And
actually think that that's key, and that's why I never
I'm
really
also
got
going to be
pulled in.
like, you know, boys, you got to wash your sheets and you got to use the separate washing machine, because I am not
Well,
dealing
it
with that.
was the same with me with my parents and drugs.
Mm.
Is my mom had a rule that was like, well, you can have drugs, but you have to ask me to buy it.
Yeah.
Like, you want marijuana? I'll get it for you, but you know, give me marijuana. Okay, here, you can have marijuana, but I have to be the one to buy it. And it just made it so uncool. When other kids would come and they would like brag about like smoking dope with their friends and stuff like that, I was just like, you mean that thing that moms give you? Like,
I think then mom
what?
give you.
Why do you think that this makes you cool?
That's
Like,
so
it
funny.
was very easy for me to see through the social temptation when I had first engaged it as that thing you have to ask your mom for.
Yeah.
And it was the same with pornography, right? Like, it was very not cool, like, to me at that age, because I was like, and I think that that really helped me intellectualize it at a very young age. I think the bans on it caused it to become this alluring thing to people, where for me, my actual obsession with fetishes and stuff like that comes more from how intellectually strange it is to me.
Yeah.
Like, why are humans doing these things when I don't understand the evolutionary pressures that would have led them to do these things, or it doesn't make sense with my understanding of human
Well, and
evolution?
I think probably what got you first excited about them was you realized that you could play arbitrage games if you pandered to other people's fetishes.
Mhm. No, and I use that a lot with the girls that I was dating in the early days. You know, when you go to a girl and you're like, yeah, I've got it. Well, then the thing is back when I was dating in the early days, and this is something guys don't do, and somehow they don't notice that girls do this. Girls walk around when they are, if you're dating and you're in that younger phase of your life, like early 20s, late teens, the girls of that age range walk around with their porn constantly. You just might not recognize it as porn because it is their romance novels and their dystopian books and their vampire books and their fairy books. But girls of
So
that
like
age
the
range,
ultimate place to learn a girl's fetishes is to go to her Goodreads profile.
yeah, they like, and I think guys don't recognize this because they see porn as in fetishes as like something shameful that they don't talk about in public, when it's like often a big part of like late teen girls' identity.
Totally.
And guys miss it because they don't know to look there. They don't know
Well,
Pay
because again,
attention to the
and this
woman.
is demonstrated through dick pics. Guys think that women relate to sex the same way they do. So they're like, well, what would I love to receive? Oh, like a picture of
Yeah,
her
I
genitals.
want a
I'll
woman.
send her a picture of mine. Aren't I being nice? It's, as
Yes,
you say in the book on
they're
sexuality,
true
it's the ultimate
feminists.
feminist move. Yes.
But you see a girl back in my days. The most common was like vampires or werewolves walking around with
Totally.
vampire books. To come to her was your story of, well, I've just always had this shameful fetish around vampire stuff, and I don't feel I can talk about it publicly. But you've seen all of her books. You know what she thinks of this. And then all of a sudden she's like, "Oh, really? Well, blah 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 blah
No.
blah." But that's just the way. It's actually remarkable to me, and I think that this is the core challenge of all this, is that guys just aren't beginning to engage with girls anymore because of all of these alternative sources. They provide an excuse for a guy. It's like, well, I don't want to be Me Too'd, I don't want to be X'd, I don't want to be Y'd.
Totally. Yeah.
So I'm just not gonna go out there. And it's so dangerous to go out there. And Chris Williamson also had a fun idea about how to fix it, which is like the next company I want to do.
Oh.
It is to create an AI that is trained on women to flirt and turn down guys so that guys can practice knowing when they're being flirted with and knowing like the way to ask out a girl in a safe way before doing it with the real thing.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be
that's
great to
interesting.
have for our young boys?
Oh yeah. No, we need to make this at least just for our kids. At
Yeah, I'm
least.
definitely building it. If somebody else doesn't build this, I'm 100% building. So I'm going to do it. I've gotten pretty good at programming chatbots, and they're very high quality at this stage. So I can do this for free, which is something I didn't realize when I first recorded this. Build a pretty high quality model of this with the existing NSFW chatbots, and I'll be doing it. I think it would be a lot of like a real utility as a product so that my kids don't end up, because this is the problem when dating as a young man. If you mess up, right, you can cross implied consent lines, which make a simple mistake grape. And if you are sleeping around a ton, like I did, I slept with like well over 100 people before I settled down. I only need to mess up with one of those people, and now I'm a grapist. If I misjudged implied consent just 1% of the time in this current world, I would still be accused of being a grapist. That is wild. It's also important to consider because this is something, women don't talk about it much, and they I think, dismiss what the red pill community has found and says, which is that women really don't find it hot to actively give consent. They kind of like the guy to take charge of the situation and to show that he can actively judge whether or not they are consenting to moving forwards. And that is, you remove a lot of, especially for younger people when they're way hornier and way more driven by what is arousing to them, you are making it so that the men who follow these rules that girls are setting are going to do much worse with girls and have girlfriends or partners who are much less infatuated with them. Like, it's hard to read. Like, and this is the other thing that like the modern world doesn't take into consideration because they just haven't, I guess, slept around a lot. But like anyone who has knows you cannot reliably determine consent that's not being actively given to you. If somebody is not actively and verbally declining consent, and somebody can be like, well, you just ask. Yeah, that's a mood killer. That's not something that people who are actually.
But also, like even that feels like a completely moot point now, because even if you killed the mood and did that, they could retroactively decide to revoke consent.
Yes.
So
like,
what's the point? Like, I'm not going to bother asking for consent if it could just be revoked later on. If like suddenly I become less cool and they decide that they now regret having slept with me, even though for the first 8 weeks it was fine. So it just, like you can't win. But that is interesting. It makes me concerned. One thing I kind of wonder is do you get the free radical problem, or do you get essentially like risky young men in a society where porn isn't necessarily banned, but where NoFap is pervasive? Like, in other words, is a NoFap man who consensually has limited his access, is he going to make himself into a radical and unhappy
Yeah, I think
incel?
he is much more likely to become radicalized from the data that we have access to.
Oh, see, that's scary, because
from
I
that
feel like that's where
perspective,
the sentiment is going. I think that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are going to be more religiously and socially conservative, whether or not it codes that way. Like, they're going to be all very like LGBTQ plus whatever, but they're also going to be like sex negative, porn negative, masturbation negative. And then you're going to get this theoretically. Then that's not good.
yeah, that's actually something that we should be worried about, socially speaking.
And add it to the list. Add it to the list.
Add it to the list. No, well, and you don't want the left to learn about this. That they learn that this stuff causes radicalization because these guys aren't having their needs met, and so they're sort of going into genetic boobicide mode. That is really dangerous, socially
Why?
speaking.
Because that you think the left would want to accelerate the revolution that brings an end to late
No,
stage
because then the
capitalism?
left would see things like NoFap as a sign of, they'd see it as dangerous and they try to kill the movement.
Wouldn't it be good if the NoFap movement was killed? Isn't the movement that we want yes fap? Yes, Malcolm.
Maybe. Well, we've got to do another episode that'll go live before this one that requires more context. I'm going to go over all the science of masturbation research because I think that that's really needed for the context on this question, which is to say that NoFap is genuinely probably a deleterious movement for our society.
Well, you already pointed out that it is, because basically if men are not sedating themselves, they are going to make themselves more dangerous to society.
Well, yeah.
It's kind of like, look at it this way. Okay. If you have schizophrenia, you could be a danger to yourself and others. You need to take medication. If you have severe anxiety, you could be a danger to yourself and others. You should probably take medication so you can function. Like,
yeah, but they need a level of motivation.
If you're not getting sex,
that craziness is what provides them with the motivation to go talk to women where they could go to jail because they talked to her in the wrong way, where they could be shut down and socially shamed. Going up and approaching somebody in a dating context is incredibly difficult. And the line between the motivation you need to go up and approach a random woman who you're interested in and the motivation you need to shoot up your school, I think is a much narrower line than many women in this society would want
I
to
feel
believe.
honestly like in many ways shooting up a school is way easier, because like,
and that's the point. You need the guys to have this insane motivation.
yeah.
If
Hold
you
on.
remove, well, here's the way I would change this.
Okay, hold on. Let me mute myself.
I think that the way I would teach our kids to relate to this is, I think, and I've mentioned this before in other episodes, I think that ultimately we need to remove a human arousal from humans. I think it's the first emotion that just absolutely must be deleted. It provides no utility. It was meant for monkeys that couldn't figure out the utility of children. And so they needed to feel some positive thing to figure out the X goes in the Y, and that makes babies. And babies are good for me. We should have a world where people are making children for the sake of the children. The reason they're excited to get a wife and have a family is for the family, not for the sex. I think people who marry for sex, like, that is a fundamentally twisted reason to marry. And it will lead to really bad relationships. And I think that this is one of the core problems you have in evangelical communities is people are essentially getting pressured to marry so that they are allowed to have sex, and they aren't even allowed to masturbate. Like, of course they're making rash decisions. So instead, I would say that I really don't care if my kids satiate their arousal pathways with any sort of whatever material they want. I think that they should instead refocus their drives in life around building families, because the happiness they will get from the family is higher than any amount of happiness you can get from any amount of sex that you're getting. Even if your sleeping was like, there were times in my life where, I'd have threesomes and I'd have multiple partners and I'd have sleep with famous people. And the amount of happiness that any of that gave me is absolutely minuscule when contrasted with the amount of happiness I get from my kids and my wife and my family. And so I think that, yeah, it's pointless. It's pointless. Like if they can,
Well, the nature of the pleasure is so different. Like the pleasure I've gotten from sex has been no different from the pleasure I've gotten from like a really good meal or from like fentanyl. Like they're all the same. They're a physical
yeah,
pleasure. And they're real. Like I'm not going to say like sex feels good, fentanyl feels good, and food feels good. Like, you know, all, if they're good. But there's nothing they're completely it's like a different game entirely compared to what it's like to be married to you, Malcolm, quite frankly, which is just like all my dreams coming true and then some, or watching our kids grow and seeing the sparkle in their eye that they inherited from you. It is marvelous, but it is also very different. So in a world in which someone lives a nihilistic and purely hedonistic life, I guess, you know, if they're just comparing sex to food to fentanyl, then like what's
but I think if you can make the point of dating the family that they are going to get from that relationship, I think that's the key.
Well, and that's, I mean, like part of my pushback to you saying you have to have men who are brave enough to just cold approach a woman. I don't think you do, because I don't think that approach ever will scale or really work, honestly. Like we've reached a point in society where like cold approaching women in the kind of way that men are expected to now is not going to work for 80% of men. It's going to work for 20%. And right now it is only working for 20%. And how dare you imply that it should work? You're in the top 0.001%. So fuck you. You're not allowed to talk. Okay. It's really hard for people out there. And I think the only way that we can fix this is by bringing back dating markets. And I actually don't think that that's a far-fetched thing to do. One, because the alternative is already so broken. But two, because both men and women from their teens through their 30s and even 40s have expressed to us again and again how awesome they would love this. It's an awesome idea. Where can I sign up? Like, put me on the list, put my kids on the list. People want these, and people are actively trying to go out and find and hire matchmakers and use matchmaking services. They just they're not designed well because there's not enough of a cohesive culture. And to your point, yes, it is about dating a family. The whole family has to have buy-in, and you have to have cultural buy-in and cultural match as well. But I do think that you can build solutions around that. And I do think that there are ways to address this. I think Keeper AI may be making some progress there, and some other people I'm sure will come up with some interesting things. So yeah, to your point, like I think yes, FAP has to be a thing. And I think it's a Band-Aid to a known problem. And yes, but I think, you know, you need yes, FAP. You also need like Boy Scouts and paintball, and like allowing men to be men, and allowing men to date, and like get out there and making it a cultural norm. And, you know, when you have that, and when you make people comfortable doing it and create venues and activities where it's allowed to happen, it's great. Yeah. Bring the girls paintballing. Then you can act heroic in front of them. Then you can bond over the trauma of being hit, you know, like whatever. You can protect them.
Wait, girls, you want to find a guy and you're young, do things like paintballing.
That sounds so
high status among males. Like, talk about playing the arbitrage game.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
That's like being a guy cheerleader. I heard a great tactic along this line from one of the girls on our Discord server today, who's now married. This worked to find her a husband, where she said what she would do is she would challenge guys to a fight when they were dating. And I was like, that is such a great way as a girl to be incredibly what is functionally sexually aggressive without a guy coding it.
Yeah, while also being like tough. There. While also being tough. Oh, sorry. I didn't.
I'm coding right now. I'm doing the.
All right. This is hanging here. She's there. Her food's there. Diapers are there. I love you.
Love you too. Be safe when you drive, okay?
I will.
But yes, to one, and people can be like, well, why would this be sexually aggressive? Because what's realistically going to happen in this fight? I can tell you, as a guy who's not completely idiotic, what most guys are going to do is they are going to either puss out, in which case she knows pussy, not a cultural fit likely, or be interested in actually fighting her. if they are interested in actually fighting her, almost no guy is going to throw the first blow. What they're going to do is they're going to wait for her to make a move to see how serious she is about this. If she does a medium hit, she doesn't want to be too hard because you don't want him to actually, you want him to know that even she was holding back a bit. But if she does that, what is the guy going to do? Even if she went fully hard, what a guy is likely going to do is what I would do, which is grab her wrists and hold her in place, because it's very easy to overpower most girls, even girls who exercise, if you're a guy who exercises to any extent. Or if I don't think I can just hold her arms in place to grapple her, both of those lead to very sexualized scenarios, which are very easy to transition for the girl into something else, and very easy to tell that the guy is actually interested in her. Because the guy isn't going to do something like that or allow the situation to escalate like that if he isn't interested in potentially getting physical with you, because he knows what's going to happen in the fight just as well as you know what's going to happen in the fight. And it can also signal cultural alignment to the guy, which can be really useful because it's quite a rough and tumble thing to do from anyone who's from one of the clan cultures.
Are we going to have our girls paintball? I haven't seen a paintball place around here.
Oh, we'll find one.
And I don't know if they're like, we're going to have to see if there are hot teens hanging out at the gun range.
Yeah, it used to be you go to the mall to meet random people, but now we'll have our online circles. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I should note here on the sexuality stuff. I'm gonna read a few more because it looks like this might go live before I went on masturbation.
Yeah.
Here's another quote: "Masturbation may contribute to a decline in many social ills. UCLA researchers found that sex criminals, on average, consume less porn than the average person, and started consuming it at a later age than the average non-sex criminal.
Forgot about that.
Had today's sex criminals been able to explore their sexuality through their imagination earlier, perhaps they would not have felt compelled to commit sex crimes." And here I'd also point out, oh yes, people who consume more pornography actually have better views of women than people who don't consume pornography.
Yeah, they were more feminist, right? Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and for people who are like, no, what about like?
Wasn't there was also one that women who consume porn, because the thought is that like it also makes women feel terrible about themselves, but instead women who consume porn were more sexually confident.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a study. Here's another quote. So we did recall a study being conducted by the Max Planck Institute showing that that intense porn consumption in men was associated with lower gray matter volume in the brain. So we went back to the only study to realize that what it actually found was that men who consumed lots of porn had lower amounts of gray matter in a specific part of the brain, the right striatum. This is the part of the brain involved with reward processing.
Oh.
All the study says is that men who have deficient reward processing pathways consume more porn.
Okay. Yeah, they probably also like consume more processed goods,
like
and
correlation than causation.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know it, that is what the authors of the study have also said in interviews.
Oh, there you go.
It's actually wild to me how just like AstroTurf NoFap is. It's
like AA. It's like AA. Any of these cold turkey things, I just get pissed, And
that's another thing. If you do struggle with porn consumption, just take naltrexone, bro.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
works for alcohol, works for porn.
It significantly. So people might think I drink a lot, but that's because they haven't seen Malcolm pre-naltrexone. I drink in a controlled fashion these days, and back then I drank in an uncontrolled fashion.
Yeah.
But I also have to note, for people who are like,
you never got drunk though. You were just like an old Englishman, talking like 1600s Englishman.
I remember when you made the rule for me that I wasn't allowed to start drinking because you were like, it's becoming a problem, and she said I couldn't start before 8 a.m. And that was
but keep in mind that Malcolm wakes up at 2 a.m. So
once.
I mean that's dude, that's if most people started drinking 8 hours into the day.
Yeah. Now I never really start drinking before 5 or so, which is fantastic.
So it's like basically you don't start drinking until like 10 p.m. a normal person's time, because again, you wake up at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So I just want to make it clear like how reasonable you're being, because you wake up so freaking early. Okay.
Well, we'll get into this in our porn episode, but it's something that should be known for those who are
that
like,
sounds wrong taken out of context.
My religion helps me not consume as much porn across the board the more restrictions your religion has on pornography, the more you will consume pornography. This is like a well-studied, inter-regional, across religions. You find this in evangelical Protestants. You find this at Catholics. One of my favorite anecdotes around this is once a Girls Gone Wild ad actually accidentally aired was it was like the 2 a.m. Good Friday Mass.
Oh no.
And it was the highest sales they'd ever had.
No. Oh no. But it gets, with Catholicism, you can just apologize. So I feel like they were asking for it, that's not their fault.
And you know which state has the highest porn consumption in the United States?
It's got to be in the Bible Belt. Where?
Utah.
Oh.
Mormons ain't getting off the hook either. Anyway, love you,
Yeah.
Simone.
Love you too. Coming down. And recording.
Anyway, I love you to death, Simone.
I love you too. I'm going to cut your hair now. Okay.
All right, come on down.
Okay.
And you are perfect.
Yeah. Good timing. She just finished this. So here I come. Snip, snip. Backyard.
I love that you became such a good barber over COVID. COVID, I think for so many people, it was like, oh, you don't need to go out to get your hair cut.
And it's like $60 a haircut or more.
Yeah.
It's insane. We saved so much money. Everyone else did sourdough and hair. No one is still doing sourdough, but I think a lot of people are still doing haircuts. And you can tell by hairstyles have changed, and you can see in stores. Like there are fewer male haircuts that are like clearly from a salon, and like the typical hairstyle is one that you can do with one of the things and some scissors. So. Okay,
I hope even after I become president, you're still cutting my hair.
That would be so cute on the White House lawn.
Yeah.
I would love to.
She takes me out to our field so we don't have to like mop up afterwards.
I know, but like the White House is perfect for that. There's plenty of lawn for me to go out and cut your hair. So
yeah. Oh, by the way, what was I gonna do? Yeah, one person did say you being on the left made him irrationally angry.
It bothers people. We have to keep everyone in their correct place, Malcolm.
Are women always supposed to be the left hand of a man or the right hand of a man?
They're supposed to be to the left so that the man can shield them from the backsplash of cars splashing on the road.
Oh.
You're my human shield.